Hello and welcome to Humane Voices, the official podcast of the Humane Society of the United States. I am Chad. Kelly, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you, Chad?
Good, doing well. So this episode's a little different for us. I'll be honest. So today's guest has traveled around the world for the organization for Humane Society Humane Society United States, Humane Society International, to work with animals, but it's not rescuing the animals necessarily. It's photographing the animals. That's the key difference.
I know, and I've got to tell you, Chad, I already have envy about today's guest, reading the bio and what she's done. So I'm excited to hear, about the work she's doing that I envy and I'd love to do.
Absolutely. I think a lot of us are jealous of Meredith and her job. So Meredith Lee is our guest today. She is the senior photo editor at the Humane Society of the United States. Meredith, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Chad.
Of course.
Kelly.
And so you've been here at the Humane Society working as a photographer for how long now?
For about 11 and a half years. So
wow. Okay. That's giving you, so you've traveled around the world with your cameras.
Yes.
Why don't you start us off? Just give us a little taste of, are there a couple memories that stick out, like places you've traveled to and the shoots were really interesting?
Oh gosh, there have been so many. I can start with Hurricane Florence in 2018. It wasn't an international shoot, but it was in the Carolinas, mostly in South Carolina in the Myrtle Beach area. And that was like just a really surreal experience. We were riding boats through neighborhoods and just seeing like the little tops of street signs poking out of the water as we would go through, just gave you an indication of sort of where you were. Houses that were multiple stories. The bottom story would be completely covered in water.
Wow. Yeah.
And we responded to one house. A family had asked us, they were not able to get all of their cats out before they had to evacuate. And we went in a house where there were multiple cats. And I remember seeing one cat swimming across a living room, which it's just surreal.
Yeah.
It was difficult conditions for our team. It was extremely hot and we were in dry suits to protect us from the floodwaters. But our team was able to capture several cats out of there and get them to safety. That was definitely a memorable experience.
So you are rescuing animals too, contrary to what Chad introed.
Oh no, I am not. I'm watching
pictures.
I am documenting the rescue. I'm not actually doing the rescue myself. Another one was Australia.
Oh, right. The wildfires. That was a few years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, it happened actually right before COVID. In fact, as I was flying out, I remember seeing on the airport TVs about a virus that was spreading in China. And I thought, that seems potentially dangerous. And sure enough, it turned out to be, it rocked our whole world. But yeah, it was January of 2020. And it was just unbelievable tragedy in Australia. Like I think 1 billion animals perished in those wildfires.
Oh my gosh! Wow,
it's unimaginable. And our team was working on Kangaroo Island, which is just off the coast, and the island is filled with eucalyptus plantations, which are wonderful for the koalas, but apparently just go up like kindling in fire because they're very oily trees. So it was like walking into a post-apocalyptic scene. It was just in black and white. Everything was in black and white with shades of gray. There were just like trees that were missing the tops and were just black charred. Most of the animals, it was very, very quiet. That was one of the things that was real eerie about it. I've never been a place that's like in a natural setting like that, that's so quiet. But we did find, several animals, and it was amazing to watch our team scanning for them. They would drive down these long rows of trees and with eagle eyes be able to spot like koalas that were on the ground or, not too high up in the trees, which usually meant they needed help. And then they could capture them and then take them back to our little area where the animals were being treated.
What an incredible experience. That's amazing.
And I remember those photos and oh gosh, Meredith, now I'm picturing the photos that you took that we put out there that were the only word I can use to describe it. And it's interesting when you say quiet, because now picturing those photos, I could see it, but they were just haunting. but
Yeah.
gave such context to, for someone that was here in the States and far removed from it and just seeing it on the ticker and on the news, but of what was happening in the devastation. I mean, that must have, I can't imagine
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
there.
I'm glad it conveyed that, because
Uh,
that's how it felt. It
Yeah.
really did feel haunting, and yeah, I've never seen or felt anything like that before.
Mm.
Um, and it was difficult. It was definitely really difficult for our rescuers, and for me witnessing it. But it was also inspiring to see the animals that were recovering. Little koalas with their hands bandaged, and then there was a koala nursery with a bunch of babies that, I think was just, heartwarming for people that needed that, to see these little
Mhm.
babies that were doing well, and they were just acting like babies, just really sweet and cute. I mean, koalas are one of the cutest animals in the world anyway, so a bunch of baby koalas you really can't top in
Yeah.
terms of
And then when you
cuteness.
talk about koalas wrapped paws and baby,
Yeah.
like,
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
that's cute on top of cute.
Yes,
Oh
yes. I remember
gosh.
one of my photos, I remember of this one with double paws bandaged, and and their little noses would be burned.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think a lot of animals were able to be saved from that. And not just koalas, of course, there were kangaroos and wallabies and other wildlife too.
I
Yeah,
feel like we could do a whole other episode on compassion fatigue, like that
for
you
sure.
experience this stuff alongside the rescuers.
Yeah.
You're going through the same emotions that they are.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. But I think it does help that I have a camera in between me and what's happening. It provides a little bit of emotional distance, and it allows
Mhm.
me to focus on that job, which I think does help to an
Okay.
extent. It's not like it completely um, separates me from it, but it does help.
Yeah. I'm curious. I want to back up a little bit and tell us a little bit about why you became interested in photography. Who was your inspiration? Just a little bit about how you got into that.
Sure. Yeah, I've really been interested nearly my whole life. My dad is a photographer. He's a really good photographer, has used it in several of his jobs, has a tremendous amount of technical knowledge, and he taught me how cameras work at a pretty young age. I can remember him describing like the f-stop and the aperture, like what it does, and comparing it to the way our eyes work.
Oh, wow.
Like if you squint, you can see farther, but it's a smaller opening. Anyway, I remember him describing that, and it made a real impact. And when I was really young, like second or third grade, I did a project in elementary school for, I don't remember what class it was, but I went to the mall and took photos with my really basic camera. It was a super simple film camera, and I just thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And then I was able to also do a project my senior year of high school, and then I studied it in college. So I've really been doing it most of my
So
life.
did you know? So when you're in the mall and you're young and you got your either pocket 110, putting the flash on, or whatever the camera of
Not that
choice is.
complicated.
Oh, okay. I had a pocket 110. That was as far as I got. But so did you think this is what I want to do? You know how you hear a lot of people knew what they wanted to do young. Was that the case with you with
I
photography?
don't know that I would say I knew that that's what I wanted to do. I was always interested in art and
Mm,
uh, just creating things. And I was fascinated too by the freezing of a moment in time that photography allowed you to do. Yeah, I think photography did always stand out to me, but I wouldn't say like from that young that I knew I wanted to be a photographer.
Right. But then
yeah.
you ended up, I mean, it's interesting how you got to HSUS, how you came aboard here, or at least had your eyes opened about us as an
Yeah.
organization.
Yeah. So the way I got involved in, I mean, I've also always loved animals, of course. I'm sure everyone that works here says that. And I've been interested in environmental conservation for years. About 20 years ago, I was living in Oklahoma and working at a small environmental state agency called the Scenic Rivers Commission. And we were tasked with protecting like 5 scenic rivers in Oklahoma. And the main one was the Illinois River. I worked alongside the Illinois River, and it was lined in some areas with chicken farms, like factory farms.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and they would use the chicken litter, the waste, to fertilize the farms, I guess, nearby, and we started to see that it was the runoff from those farms would go into the river, and because of the high, I believe it was phosphorus content, it would create these algae blooms and then fish kills. So I started to realize that, the impact of the factory farms wasn't just the animals themselves, but it was a much broader environmental problem too. And I started to get involved in animal protection, animal activism, and at the same time, I was volunteering at a local shelter, and our shelter had entered this contest to try to, get some funds for our daily operations. And we won the contest along with some other shelters. And my husband and I went to Las Vegas to receive the award. And the HSUS was presenting the award,
Oh, that's
and
so funny.
yeah, it was wild. And they gave a presentation about their work. And just seeing the slides of the different work that's been done. One in particular about the seal hunt, I remember
Mm.
still to this day sticks in my mind, that image. And I thought, that is my dream job right there. That's my job.
Oh, interesting.
I didn't
Wow.
know, if I would ever be able to get there, but a few years later, yeah, I was able to. And yeah, felt very lucky, very, very lucky ever since to be here.
That's
So with,
amazing.
the work you've done, how do you see photography and how it impacts animal protection efforts?
First of all, I think it just shines a light onto issues that people otherwise wouldn't have a window into. Um, and that's vitally important. If something's operating in the dark, you don't, and people don't know it's going on. People aren't going to have any, ability to stop it. And for photography in particular, I think as I think I might have mentioned, but I love that it freezes time for like a specific moment in time, and that allows people to really study the details of that moment. The environment that the animal's in, the expression on the animal's face, and I think that allows it to become more memorable to people and can spur them to action. So I think it does have the power to make an impact for sure.
As I mentioned earlier, I think, the example that you talked about with the Australian wildfires, that instantly you could be connected to thousands of miles away. This is what's happening. And when you take an image of a koala, for example, it's so iconic of that region. So it just,
Mm.
all of the story of the tragedy, the trauma, but understanding it, I mean, it just all could be in an image, you know.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's true. And that's one thing, particularly with rescues, that I try to show is, the feeling of the animal itself, but also the context that it's in
Mhm.
is so important to letting people see the reality, of
Yeah.
what we're trying to help with.
Yeah.
I've seen you so much over the years, Meredith, in these situations at a puppy mill, working alongside law enforcement. And there's so much that goes, I think maybe a good explanation from you would be helpful of there's so much happening in such a quick amount of time and you're dealing with so many things at once. Can you talk about that a little bit? There's a lot of challenges to what you're doing, right?
And chaos, I would
Oh,
imagine,
absolutely.
like literally chaos around you potentially.
Yeah, there can be all kinds of challenges in these situations. One of them is the elements. I described Hurricane Florence, responding to that in the heat and being in the dry suits. You can also have the other extreme. I responded to a rescue that was in sleet, freezing cold and sleet, and we were getting wet and freezing, of course. And just rain by itself can be, really difficult with equipment like we have. And yeah, I've ruined a light that way, responding to one rescue.
So it's
Um,
not so good getting water on the lens, I guess.
it doesn't help, no. If you tilt the camera up, it gets on your lens. If you tilt it back, it gets on the back of the camera. So there's no good angle
Right, right, right.
to
Well,
avoid it.
aside from I mean, the weather is one thing, but there's so many other factors that you're
Oh,
dealing
sure.
with. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, taking photos, I don't know if people understand how long it can take to get compelling photos. It takes a while to get the right light, the right composition, and wait for the right moment. But with rescues and a lot of the stuff we do, it's more fast paced, and our animal rescue team is going through the scene at a pretty quick clip. And we have to keep up with the action. So we don't have, the luxury of taking a ton of time. So that's a challenge. And then other technical issues, dealing with animals that are behind cage bars, and the cages are reflective, and that's challenging. Just the dim lighting inside. A lot of these places are very, very dark. That's challenging. The contrast in light from going inside to outside, if we're tracking the action of a rescuer carrying a dog outside, that we have to shift our settings really quickly.
Right.
So yeah, there's definitely a lot of
Even
challenges.
you have to be mindful probably in situations of you're taking pictures of an animal and you're trying to capture what you want the picture to convey to tell the story or a narrative. But you also have to be sensitive to, I'm taking a picture of this animal, and how, balancing that I think would be a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. I try to be really cognizant of what the animal is feeling. This is
Mm.
usually in these situations, it's such an overwhelming day for them. They've been living in usually pretty horrific conditions for who knows how long. And then we come in and their whole world is turned upside down. It's everything is so dramatic and different in a day. And new people, new equipment, sounds and smells. It's a lot of chaos for them. So I try to be as sensitive to that as I can. And if they're seeming nervous of me, then I'll, let them sniff my hand, let them sniff my camera, my light, to try to get them to be as comfortable with it as possible. If they still seem pretty stressed out and nervous, I just try to limit my time as much as possible with them. Yeah, and I think that helps. I also find myself talking to them, and telling them it's going to get better from here. Today is
Yeah.
it's as bad as it's going to be from here on out. So I think that probably helps me more than them. But
Are there particular animals in these? I'm sure these animals impact you, right? And somehow you fixate on one or two that, like, oh my, and you have some kind of connection with them. I'm sure that's happened over the
Mhm.
years to you.
Yeah, it has. It actually happened in this last rescue. My personal dog right now is a pitty. And there was a little pitty at this rescue that just melted my heart. I would have taken her home if my pitty would have accepted her. And he absolutely would not, but she was so sweet. And then another dog that really stuck with me was the little Ricky Bobby. My very first rescue was a puppy mill in North Carolina. There was a little dachshund there that was paralyzed from the waist down. And he was pulling himself along on his front paws, and just really sad and pitiful. But a few months later, of course, we rescued him. And a few months later, I was able to go do a follow-up shoot with him. And he had a wonderful mother who had gotten him a wheelchair, and he was just zipping around as fast as he could on it. Like a lot, he was so exuberant and happy. And it was just so incredible to see his transformation and how happy he was. And she called him Ricky Bobby because he liked to go fast. If you've seen Talladega
Oh,
Nights.
which probably that doesn't get to happen a lot. I mean, how nice the full circle. I mean, often you're probably taking snapshots and pictures and, of animals you'll never see again.
That's true. Yep, that's
But
absolutely
that
true.
must have been particularly rewarding
It
to
was.
back and
It
see what
was.
happened.
Absolutely. Yeah. It is super meaningful to be able to see their transformation. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would think all of the work, obviously with the challenges you've shared, but would be so meaningful. I mean, when people find out, you're at a cocktail party and everybody's talking about what do you do? What do you do? And you tell people what you do. What do they say?
Um, yeah, I think people are generally interested, and just probably want to hear more about it. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if there's like a pat answer.
Interested and
I get,
probably
yeah.
jealous when they're not thinking of the challenges, but just you get to travel the world and tell a
Yeah.
story and connect people to something they otherwise wouldn't be connected to, I would think.
Yeah, I think sometimes people don't understand what exactly my job entails. I think they initially think I'm taking photos of cute puppies, if they don't
Oh,
really
yeah.
understand our work. I've gotten that before. Yeah, but I do try to share. I use it as an opportunity to explain what our organization
Yeah.
does, and the breadth of work that we do.
Yeah.
Well, Meredith, are there, as a photographer, I have such trouble just cell phone photography of my own dog who just turns his head away. I was curious if you have issues. Are there certain animals that are tougher to photograph that refuse to be photographed or anything like that?
Oh yeah, 100%. I think cats are notoriously difficult. It seems like if you want them to look at you, they will intentionally not look at you. So you have to employ other tricks. My dog is actually really bad about it. He will not look at me. Also, if he sees my phone go up, and he can tell, and he will turn away in a matter of seconds. So I've started. I mean, I've used lots of different sounds to get them to look at me. There's a girl on our Puppy Mills team who she at the we had a beagle versary for our the anniversary of the rescue of the 4,000 beagles from the laboratory. And she was making an elephant noise to get their attention, and it was so different that they all looked, even so I was like, I need to start doing that, and I've done that occasionally, but it's a hard one to replicate.
Absolutely.
You need to
That's
do that at
interesting.
home with your own dog.
I have tried it with him, and he does look at that one, yes.
I
But you can
mean,
only use it a couple times and then they're
And that's
like,
right.
"Oh, I've
Yeah,
heard
you'll
that."
you
get
have to.
used to it. But it's
Yeah.
fascinating to think that you've probably, from koalas to, to puppies, but to all sorts of animals, captured them and gotten them to get a good picture to tell a story. But in your own home, Meredith, you're struggling with that.
It's the reality. It is
It's
true.
interesting, and I'm not judging, but that seems like
Well, listen, treats are the key. I had to do a
yes.
shoot with him like a few months ago. I think it was maybe last summer. And treats make all the difference. Like if you can get treats and food involved, something that they're passionate about, that usually is the trick.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that for sure.
That's so funny. Maybe there's a young person listening, maybe they're interested in some kind of career with photos and photography and animals. What do you have any advice for them just as an expert? You're a professional, more than a decade into your
Sure.
career.
Yeah, I think practice. They say, photograph what you know, write what you know. I think that it's helpful to start there.
Mm.
Photograph what's around you, what you're familiar with. I think it's a really good exercise to try to show it in new and creative ways that look different. Um, and also, I would definitely suggest volunteering at your local animal shelter or even farm animal sanctuary if you live near one. They can usually use the photos, and it's a great way to hone your skills. And animal shelters in particular, it can be an amazing tool for helping them to get adopted. A good photograph makes a world of difference in what people imagine about that animal. So it can, yeah, take an animal that's been languishing in a shelter and get them adopted pretty quickly. So
That's
Yeah.
great advice.
Do you have, I'm curious, Meredith, you probably have lots of photos that are favorites. So not so much a favorite, but a photo that you've taken that you think this one tells exactly what I wanted to tell, and maybe you've gotten feedback on, or just what you think of in your portfolios. This is maybe an iconic photo,
oh gosh,
or a
I
photo
think.
that's most memorable, maybe.
Gosh, yeah, that is very hard for me to like figure out superlatives for anything in life. But I mean, there are photos that I definitely remember. There are photos that I've gotten feedback about. I think I don't know if you guys remember a little kitten that was called Tiny Tina. It was a cat rescue in Texas. And she was really in sad shape. Her eyes were goopy and she was just pitiful. Um, but I think a photo from that, I got feedback that it really impacted somebody,
Oh,
and they wrote in and talked about how it impacted them and it caused them to want to help us in our mission to help animals. So I think that photos, does stick in my mind for that reason. And I like the photo to begin with, but yeah, I think that helped too.
but
Um,
it must be great to hear feedback like that, because it's feedback that is affirmative and telling you you're on the right path as a photographer. but also as someone that cares about animal protection.
Absolutely. Yeah. It makes a huge difference to hear from people and know that your work is making a difference and actually helping to further our mission. That's what we're trying to do. So yeah, that's really impactful to hear that.
Well, Meredith, thank you so much for being on the show
Thank you.
and telling us all about your travels around the world and this amazing photography that you've been doing for the last decade plus.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Absolutely. Well, we'll be back next time with a new episode of Humane Voices. Bye, everybody.